How are you guys doing tonight? Today I have a special guest where we're going to be unveiling some hidden knowledge with Daryl D. James. But before I bring him on, I want to welcome everyone. Good evening to you all. Thank you guys for spending your Wednesday evening with me. Welcome to this special edition of our live series on the real Ishmael Perez. I always have to point that out due to the pirated channels that, of course, are trying to be me, but they're stealing all my content too. So this is the real Ishmael Perez channel. And of course, I do have to give a date. Today is Wednesday, April the 17th, 2024. And we are officially on a positive ascending timeline trajectory. Thank God for the forces of light. And today we're diving into the extraordinary depths of hidden knowledge and cosmic secrets, right? That are related and associated with the off-world programs, the secret space program. So this session is also dedicated to celebrating the efforts, of course, of the Y-Hats, the Earth Alliance, the positive secret space program factions, and of course the Galactic Alliance that are all collaborating together to make sure that humanity advances into the next stage of human evolution. So as we gather here, let's remember that on this very day in history, April 17th, the Bay of Pigs invasion was launched in the year 1961, which was a significant event in the dance of geopolitical powers. And for those that know what happened to our late president, JFK, who was a whitehead, besides trying to end and eliminate the corrupt central banking system, one of his other endeavors was to, of course, end the pig of base, which has a lot to do with putting Castro into power in Cuba, communistic Castro. All right, as you guys know, for those that have read my book, The Secret Government, Invisible Architects, the entire, all of these, fascist, communistic political figures were all groomed by no other than, you know who, the international bankers under the control of the harlot, the abomination of desolation, the Jesuits, the Roman Church. Anyhow, this serves as a reminder of how our understanding of history continues to evolve as more hidden truths come to light. Now, before we continue, here are two fun facts about myself. I always like to reveal things about myself that nobody knows about. I absolutely love chicken. I love being on the carnivore diet. I just finished eating some steak and eggs with avocado and blueberries. But when it comes to eating my chicken, I love eating it with holy basil, spinach, and olive oil. And then, of course, I love avocado. So I always eat avocado with all of my protein. And so that's another fun fact about myself that nobody knew about. I am on the carnivore diet. Sorry, guys. I tried doing the vegan thing years ago, and I ended up getting sick. I lost muscle. I lost strength. I lost my mojo. I was just not feeling it. So the carnivore diet works perfectly for me. Everybody's different. Oh, one of my books just fell from behind me. It's okay. There's probably ancestors in this room today. So, Mother, thank you so much for being here, wherever you're at. So, if you guys have any questions for Daryl D. James, please put those questions in capital letters because of his time. I'm only going to get to the top questions. For those that don't know me, I am the host of the Real Ishmael Press YouTube Live, but I'm also the author of two books, Our Cosmic Origin, and the most recent book that just came out 3 weeks ago, The Secret Government, Invisible Architects. And of course, I am also a galactic and cosmic professor. I have my own courses, which leads me to reveal my next upcoming course. But before I do, I want to remind you guys that my work is directly to unveil the truths, the hidden truths, and the complex interconnectedness behind what really happens from behind the scenes, the hidden rulers, our cosmic origins, the truth about other dimensions, extraterrestrials. That is what I do, all right? Tonight, we're honored to have an incredible guest. Again, as a reminder, Daryl D. James, a former U.S. Navy officer and a veteran of the secret space program. But before we launched into our cosmic and geopolitical journey with Daryl, let's talk about some exciting opportunities and updates. So don't forget that I will be in San Rafael this weekend, all right? My class or my presentation is Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. And for those that attend, I will have some copies of The Secret Government, Invisible Architects that are going to be signed. And yeah, that's something to look forward to for those that want to meet me in person. Now, for those that took my Mystic Arts class back in the day when I was with Mystic Arts, I know that I had something going with you guys where you guys were able to take the class over and over, but this time is different. I added more information. I go much in depth with our Cosmic Origin course that I have been offering in the last couple months. So what I'm going to do is, because I don't really know, I don't have evidence of who took my class when I was part of the Mystic Arts, which I am not anymore. I'm going to do a free course on March 4th, accessible to anyone. No verification needed. Just one course for 1 hour, all right? I'm going to do a course for 1 hour coming up March the 4th. And this is a great chance to dive into the mysteries of the universe with me, your professor, Ishmael Perez. So this upcoming course, which begins on the 11th, on the 4th, I'm going to be offering a free course on the 4th. However, there is going to also be a 3-part series to this course, which is only going to be an hour, not 2. So I'm cutting the price in half. So instead of doing a 2-hour course, which begins on May the 11th, I'm only going to be offering half of the class for 1 hour for the next 3 consecutive Saturdays at half the price. So instead of $400, I'm actually going to drop the price less than half, only to $150. All right, so that way we can make it more affordable for those that can't pay the 2-hour classes. I'm only going to do an hour class, 4 consecutive classes for $150. Okay, for those that join my new class, which starts May the 11th, these sessions are designed for a quick deep dive into our cosmic origins, our multidimensionality, and much more. We're going to go deep, guys. So the content reveals that I'm excited, all right? I'm excited overall to regularly release exclusive content that reveals the research methods behind my work, including detailed discussions of the books and sources that have influenced me to write, especially my new groundbreaking work, The Secret Government, which was restructured, rewritten in a period of only 3 months to get it out there to the people that are now ready for this suppressed history regarding, again, the history of the Cabal and the history of the White Hats. So don't miss our segment, guys. I'm going to be releasing a segment. I'm going to be releasing a series, rather, of where I get all my information, because a lot of you ask me, Ishmael, how do you know what you know? Where do you get all your information? Well, I am going to reveal all of my 150 plus literary works that I was able to consolidate in my masterpiece, The Secret Government. I almost forgot which book I was promoting. So let's discuss this. All right, so of course, we do know that the White Hats also have a suppressed history. A lot of people think that they just emerged out of the scene in the last 50, 60 years with the plan. But technically, according to my research and as revealed in The Secret Government, Invisible Architects, the White Hats have always been around, guys. They've always been around, all right? So make sure you guys order my book. If you haven't gotten your copy, it is a massive revelation. I'm getting tons of positive reviews. People are loving it. And as a reminder, on the 4th of May, I'm going to be doing a free class to kind of just, for those that took my class back when I was with the Mystic Arts, I'm going to do one final free class, and this includes everyone. Whoever wants to sign up, it's going to be free. 1 class, 1 hour, and that's it. But after that, again, I'm going to be doing a series of a 4-class series at less than half the price for those that want to go into our cosmic origin. Now, let's prepare to explore tonight's session with gratitude and curiosity as I bring forth Daryl. So Daryl D. James was enlisted in the U.S. Navy on January 24th in the year 1999. He served 7 years, including 1 year in Iraq with the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 7, also known as code word NMCB number 7. In 2004, while stationed at the Royal Air Force Base at St. Mawgan in Cornwall, UK, he passed through what he thought was a metal detector, but it was actually a piece of technology that measured every biometric signature that he had, including his IQ, which was measured at 195, which is up there. So he's obviously a genius. He was soon recruited to join the secret space programs and guaranteed a position as a pilot in Solar Warden, which is the Starfleet that monitors and protects our solar system. As a miscommunication with a 9-foot tall reptilian, he was sent to mine in the moons. And with no further ado, here is Daryl. Daryl, how you doing?
Good to be here, Israel. Thanks for having me.
My brother, it is a great honor and pleasure to meet another member of the Secret Space Program. So, Daryl, I mean, tell us about how, like, when did you find out, like, that you were recruited into this top secret off-world program? Because apparently you started with the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, well, I was in the U.S. Navy at the time, and yes, St. Mawgan, and well, I had a watch. I had a balls to 4 watch, they call it in the Navy, which is 0000 to 4 a.m. And well, no, I'm sorry. Let me start again. I was one of the guys came into the garage where I worked in, because I actually didn't work in the underground base. I worked in the garage, like on the other side of the base. One of the guys came up and said, "Hey, you have to escort some civilian workers from Siemens into the underground base." So I went over there, and I got to the quarterdeck, which is like the lobby of the base. It's like where you check into a new command. If you're going to go on vacation, leave, you check out, you check in there. And I got to the quarterdeck, and there was a sliding glass door where you went to go into the underground base.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something that looked like a metal detector. And, it was just like rectangular size, rectangular top. It had a bit of a ramp on the floor with the black and yellow, caution tape that you see in the military so you don't trip over the ramp. And the first man from Siemens said, "I'm not walking through that bloody thing." So I thought, well, I don't want to walk through it either. And then there was a guard behind the table, and he said, "No, you walk through." And I thought, well, it's just a metal detector, so I went through it. I watched them fix like a pump, and that was the end of that day. So then I had the balls to 4 watch, and I met Michael Aquino. And he was a colonel in the Army. He was in his uniform, and he was reading papers, and I think he was probably reading my file. I'm not sure. I think he maybe wanted to see me in person. And because as soon as I walked in, he was there, and he asked me how I was doing, where I was from, how I liked England, things like that. And he kind of gave me the creeps, and I just said, "Excuse me, sir." I was Rover Watch. I said, "I'm going to do another round around the base," where you walk around the base like security almost. And that was the end of that. Then I had another balls to 4 watch, and there was a first class petty officer of the watch, and he was heavy set, blonde hair, blonde mustache. And we were sitting down, and he pointed at the computer monitor and said, "What do you think about that?" And when I looked at the computer monitor, and it just looked like a stereotypical gray. It was like black and white, and it was like looking up at a camera. It looked like in a room. And I said, "Well, did you get that off the internet?" And he said, "No, look." And next to those sliding glass doors, there was this very big window. It was like 6 inches from the floor, 6 inches from the ceiling, very large window. And there was this little gray standing behind it, but he was like a light brown. He had a fold of skin from his tear duct that went down to his cheekbone. He had 5 fingers, very long. He had to almost keep his hands in like C shapes when he walked, so they wouldn't drag on the ground, like he could pick something up without bending his knees or back. And he said, "Do you mind if it comes in here?" And I said, "Does it mind if I look at it?" Because I didn't know if it was like a wild animal or whatever. I was going to stare at it. And they said, "No, it doesn't mind." And it walked through these sliding glass doors, and it had like a it looked like a pistol in its hand, like a silver pistol. And I just got back from Iraq, so I said gun, and then it was coming at me, and I stood up and I pointed at it and I said gun. And that same guard that was behind that table that said no, you walk through, he was behind them, and he no longer had he had a weapon over his shoulder. And when I stood up and yelled gun, he put his weapon at the ready, which means it wasn't pointed at me, but it was off his shoulder in his hand.
Mhm.
And I realized it was for me, not him. So I sat back down and went up to like this old, junky government issued Dell computer that was sitting on the floor, and it took it apart. It was actually a drill. It was like a little drill. It looked like it was polished metal drill, and it was catching screws in its hands as it was doing it. And it didn't have to guide it or anything like that. The bit in, it just was able to do it like a machine, really quick. And it was catching it every time. It slid the top off, took out 2 gigs of RAM, reached up. It was only about, I don't know, 3 feet tall. Reached up on the table, grabbed 2 more gigs of RAM, put them in, slid the top back on, and it kind of flicked its wrist and was able to like set a screw in between its fingers every time it flicked its wrist forward. And it put it together almost as quickly as it took it apart. And then it just stood there and like let me look at it. And I looked over there and it kind of turned its head for me, and I looked the other way and it turned its head for me, and I looked at its hands and it moved its hands back and forth. And then I got kind of bored with it and it walked away. It walked back into the underground base, and I was pinching myself the whole time. I was sitting down and pinching myself with my thumb as hard as I could, my thumbnail. And I remember the petty officer of the watch, he said, "Do you think you're dreaming?" And I said, "No, I want to have a mark in case you wipe my mind, so maybe I'll remember this." And he said, "Well, we're not going to wipe your mind yet." And he said, "You're smart." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, like really smart." And I said, "Like 140, 150 IQ." And he said, "More like 190, 195.
Mhm.
And he showed me this on the monitor. He showed me like color-coded lines that kind of went up and down a little bit. And there was one above me, and then there was me, and he said, "See, you're the second smartest guy on base." And then there was a gap, and then there was some more, and then there was another gap, and all the rest of the guys at the bottom. And he started saying things like, "Do you have any hobbies?" And I said, "Well, I used to play classical guitar." And he said, "Well, they'll really like that." And I said, "Well, who's they?" And he said, "Well, there's Germans up there." And I said, "Like up where?" He said, "Well, in the moon and beyond." And he said, and there's others and things like that. And he I asked him what they were, and I was told later on by the executive officer of the base that he really didn't know anything, but this is what he told me. He said that we don't know what they are, but they've been on Earth just as long as we have. We used to worship them like gods. There was some sort of war, and they were driven underground. That was part of the deal, the peace treaty, that they had to live underground, and they've been infiltrating like our, you know, educational and our religious systems ever since then. They're trying to get it to us like underhanded way. And he also told me, he said, he asked me if I knew the guy who always won the PRT test, which is the physical readiness test. And that's like the guy who does the most push-ups and sit-ups and runs the fastest, and everybody knows that guy. And he says, "That's me." He said, "I joined the program." And this guy was 35, but this younger kid was like 18. He said, "That's me. That's why I have the mustache." He said, "I joined the program. Don't tell him." And that's how that night went. And then on the Monday of that day, the executive officer came to the garage to meet me and asked if he could talk to me. We went for a walk. At first, it was small talk. How do you like England? Things like that. And then he said, "What did you think? It's pretty interesting, huh?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "How does it feel to know you have a 195 IQ?" And guys were talking to me in the base. It was a small base, and they're like, "You have a 195 IQ. Why are you a CB, which is construction battalions?" And I said, "I had a marijuana paraphernalia charge when I was 19, so all I could do was construction or be a cook. I had really no other option." And yeah, I said, he said, "How does it feel that you have an 195 IQ?" I said, "Well, you would know because you're over 200," because he was the only other guy on base that was smarter than me. And he said, "Well, who told you that?" And I realized I accidentally told on a friend, and I was like, "I don't want to say. Well, tell me." So I told him, but I said, "Everybody knows. Everybody's been, coming up to me and talking about it." And then he started talking about Gary McGinnon. And this was only a year ago, and this was in the UK area. This was like Scotland. And he hacked into NASA. He got into the US Army. He got in the US Navy. And he told me that when he hacked in the US Navy, he found a file called Project Solar Warden. And, names, ranks, social security numbers of extraterrestrial officers were in that file. Pictures of cigar-shaped craft over the moon were in that file. And he said it's all real. He said all of it. It was just kind of like that. And it was difficult to wrap my mind around. And he said, you see, we have this program. It's called the 20-year and back. He said, we'll put you into the program. You'll do 20 years. We'll send you back 20 years, age regress you 20 years, and wipe your mind. And I told him, I said, I could believe in going back in time and getting your, mind wiped, but there was something about age regression I found hard to believe. Mm-hmm. And he said, after what you just saw, you find that hard to believe. And I said, well, touche, sir, but yes. And he said, well, it's true. He really wasn't interested in me and try to, convince me any further. And it was almost this kind of, this is how the universe is. This is how, the world is. Those other people, they don't know anything. And, I'm giving you an opportunity to become a pilot of a 4-kilometer-long starship, he said. And he said it looked similar to the ships from Battlestar Galactica. And, it was just very, I don't know, mind-blowing. And still half of me really didn't believe it, even the whole time until I got to the point where, I saw a reptile. I really didn't believe it. And I told him, I said, that machine, it detected everything. That machine, it detected if you had blood clots, like, if you drank, if you smoked, if you did drugs, it knew your IQ, it knew everything. The guy was telling me all this stuff. And I said, my father died of a heart attack, a widowmaker, when I was 19. And, he had no warning. He just had, a piece of cholesterol in one of his arteries. It broke off and he died. I said, if we had technology like that, it would have saved his life. And I said, why doesn't that, why doesn't the public have access to this? And he talked about population control and things like that. And I said, well, there has to be like a side that wants to bring this out to the public. There has to be some sort of faction side, whatever you want to call it. And he said, you mean like a traitor? And I said, well, no, sir. I mean, there just has to be a side. And he said, well, there is. And I said, well, if you can get me on that side, I'll do it. And so I shook his hand and, saluted him. And he said, one more thing, Mr. James, you're going to be escorted by a reptile and he's big. And I really didn't know what he was talking about at the time. And I remember, like, in the barracks, the guys would talk and things. That game Halo was out on Xbox. And we used to play it in the barracks. And one of the guys, one time they said, hey, did you see that reptile today? I was just waiting for the next game. I was just kind of daydreaming. And another guy said, yeah, he was big. And I kind of thought there were like 4-legged monitor lizards, I guess you would say, like maybe an underground base. Because I was thinking like, like a normal person, But, and then another guy said, yeah, and he talked funny. And I turned around and I said, what? There's lizards that talk to you? And they said, yeah. I said, they walk around on all fours and they talk to you? And they said, no, they stand upright like us. They're humanoid. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and yeah, they can talk and they're very large. And I thought they were just messing with me because I was the new guy. So I really kind of blew it off. And then there was another time where, this is when after I agreed to join the program. So this was a Monday and it wasn't going to be until Friday. So I had, all the weekdays left to go. And I don't know, it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday. And this one guy said, hey, I joined the secret space program and there were these mines in the moon and I worked in these mines and they had these shock collars around your neck and you worked in groups. And if somebody in the group didn't work hard enough, they would shock everybody in the group. It was like a mass punishment thing. And there were these brothels and your only like payment to work was sex. Your only motivation to work was sex. So they had all these brothels and, he was just talking about it. And then all of a sudden a voice happened. And it was kind of like a feedback loop. And it said something like, now hear this, you are now in violations of section 7 and 8 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If you do not stop right now, you will face up to $100,000 in fines and 10 years in prison. That'll be all. And then I said, what was that? And I said, is there a speaker in here? And they said, no, with the technology they have, they don't need speakers. And I said, well, what was it? And one of them said, they're listening right now. We can't talk about it. So they just didn't want to talk about it any further. Another guy came up to me the next day and he said, hey, did you hear that voice in the room? And I said, yeah. And he said, you know, those rectangular blocks on the tower next to the underground base? And I said, yes. And he said, that's the 5 golf towers. You know, 5 golf is what it is.
Yeah.
And he said, they can create a microwave beam and they can put it into a room. They can go through the walls, go into a room. They can hear everything, see everything, and they can talk to you if they want. So it was like this technology in 2004 that they were using on this base that I didn't know what it was. And I mean, that's how it began. And then eventually, well, it was probably Thursday, probably a Thursday, you know, night, you know, the night before I was going to actually join the program. And the command was telling them, I found out later on, the command was telling these guys in the barracks, like, you know, hey, this guy doesn't work in the underground base, so he isn't familiar with anything. Because, you know, it sounded like these things would just walk around as the guys were working. It was a base to detect submarines, you know, from like Russia, Korea, China. And that was kind of like the front. But what it was actually for was, you know, slavery, and it was extract from little ones, like, you know, a place to harvest that.
Yeah.
And there were caverns underneath. I found out later. He told me that all of the underground bases have caverns. They were actually made by reptiles and greys, like thousands, millions of years ago, maybe. And they always have that. They always have, you know, the harvesting there, and they always have looking glass technology. They all have looking glass. Also, all underground bases have looking glass technology, and they all participate in this harvesting. But it's like the guys who work there, they don't know. You know what I mean? They really don't. But it's like there's a clique of like Satanists that work directly with the reptiles, and those are the guys who actually know that what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so yeah, Friday. Oh, and this guy in this, you know, he was the room across from the TV room. Said he left his door open, and the TV room, you know, the door was open. And it was one of these kind of things where he wanted to overhear me. He wanted to want me to hear what he was saying. And he said something like, "You're going to be taken to a density chamber." He said, "You're going to be strapped to a chair. Most of the ETs we work with are 5th density." He said, "Once you get pushed up from 3rd to 5th density, you'll become stronger, faster. Your IQ will go up 200 points, and you'll become more of a collective. Like when you're in a group of people, you kind of become that group." And I really, you know, I just heard this and I didn't know what to think. So Friday night came around. I came to the quarterdeck, and that same first class petty officer was there, and he had about a stack of papers like that. And it was one of those things where he already had it X, you know, for initial and signing and stuff, and he was flipping the pages for me, and he signed here, initial here. And in the beginning, I was trying to read it. And, you know, he said something like, "We'll be here all night if you read this." And what I did read, it was very kind of like metaphysical, like esoteric. It was, you know, written in lawyer speak, but it was something to the effect of like the consciousness of the first party now belongs to the second party. And it really freaked me out. And I didn't want to sign it. And I said, "I don't know about this. I got cold feet." And he said, "You're already back there, so just sign the damn papers." So he was saying that I'd already come back from the 20-year and back, and I was being age regressed in the underground base. And I realized it was in a time loop, and it kind of was like disturbing. And, you know, I said something like, "I'm doing this for Dad" or something. So I signed everything. I sat down. He got on the phone. He said, "All right, send him in." And about 5 minutes passed. And he said, "All right, go with him." And when I looked up in that same big glass window area, there was this huge reptile. It was like 9.5 feet tall, dark brown. He had a flat face. He had a mouth that went across and then up. He had kind of like gold alligator eyes, and he had ridges going down his head. And, you know, I stood up and I said, "Jesus Christ." I said, "He's not going to eat me, is he?" And he said, "He's stronger and faster than you. If he wanted to, he would have eaten you by now." And eventually he came out of the room and like just walked into the quarterdeck, and I just saw him. And there was this smaller kid behind him. It wasn't that same guard. It was, I found out later he was an off-world German. That's what the military calls like the off-world Germans like Knockwoff and Dark Fleet.
Right.
And so I was pretty freaked out, but I got up. I don't know if I was scared it was going to catch me if I tried to run away or what. I just got up and I started walking with them. We went to the underground base, went down the elevator. We were walking, and the kid kept on butt stroking me in the back with his rifle, hitting me with the butt of the rifle on the spine. And I really didn't realize the predicament I was in. I thought I was still in the military, but I was basically a slave now. And I really didn't realize what was happening. And he kept doing it, and I wasn't looking. I stopped looking around. I just stared at the reptile's back, and the reptile's wearing one of those blue skin tight suits that you wear, but this much larger, and that you see like on the internet, pretty much. They're like one of those kind of suits. And he kept on doing it and hitting me and hitting me, and I was like range coach, and I knew how like weapons worked, and I knew if somebody's doing that, they're pretty much just fooling around, and you really don't do something like that unless you really want to take someone down or whatever. And he did it again, and I turned around and I grabbed his weapon and I put my leg behind his legs and I threw him on the ground and knocked the wind out of him. And I remember the reptile said, no, the reptile didn't say. He said, "Leave us." That's what it was. And it was bizarre. It was kind of the way he spoke. Like the first syllable was very deep, deeper than any man could be. But then the second one kind of had to be pushed out, and it was a little bit more higher pitched. So it was kind of like, "Leave us." It was kind of like that. And the kid kind of scurried back, on his hands and feet, looking up at me. And he looked at me and looked at his weapon, looked at me and looked at his weapon. I held it out. He grabbed his weapon and he walked away. And when I turned around, the reptile was like right in front of me. He was like flexing all his muscles, and he was like letting me know how big he was. And I looked, I saw his eyes peering over his chest muscles, and the first thing that came to my head was, "I'm sorry about what I said before. You're much more civilized than him."
Mm-hmm.
And they don't bare their teeth or furrow their brows. Like they really don't have muscles in their face like we do. It's like the only way you can tell that they're mad is if their eyes. And his eyes were squinting, and when I said that, his eyes just opened up normal. And he turned around and he said, "Follow me." So I started following him, and I remember there were like golf carts. We were gradually walking downhill. There were like golf carts, so maybe you had to go somewhere further. There were like bicycles leaning up against the wall, so if you could jump on a bike and kind of ride the bike down in the underground base if you had to go somewhere far away. And then we went up like a catwalk, like a 3-step catwalk, and it had like, almost like a watertight door you see in the Navy with like, the handle and everything. And we walked in, and there was this chair there, and it was this big chair, like it was made for one of them. And Robert later on told me, the executive officer, his first name was Robert, he told me that we have the ability naturally to go up one density. He said, we're in third, and fourth is like astral plane spirit world. Through, meditation and things like that, you can go into the astral plane. He said, but reptiles don't have the ability to go up one density naturally. They can't go from fourth to fifth. So this chair, this density chamber, is actually reptilian technology, so that they compete with like the fifth density beings, which is kind of like the movers and shakers. You're like right in the middle pretty much. And it was very big. It had like holes in it, like a gas chamber chair, and had straps in it. And plus the airtight door and everything. And they had this program when I was a kid in elementary school called DARE, which was like a anti-drug, anti-crime. It was started by Nancy Reagan. And they brought a gas chamber like in a trailer to our school one time, and I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember it scared me. And we were asking, do people die in this chair? And the police were telling us, yes, people died. And it brought that memory back. So I just ran away. I thought this thing was trying to gas me. I thought it was trying to kill me. It grabbed me and it just threw me in the chair like I weighed 10 pounds. And it had my, hand over my arm and kind of, holding it onto the arm of the density chair. And I remember its nails were kind of like black, but it looked like our nails. But as soon as they went out a little bit, they kind of rolled into each other and created like black needles. Like either side rolled into each other and created black needles. And I grabbed his thumb, and I was kind of pulling his thumb off. I was trying to get him off me, and he was putting the strap on my arm. And he headbutted me and knocked me out for a second. I think he did. I really wasn't paying attention. I was just knocked out for a second. And then when I came to, I had, my right arm and my right leg strapped in. So I kind of got off the chair. Like I said, it was very big, and I was kind of hanging off of it, like it was, meant for like a 9 foot being. And it just pushed me on the chest and pushed me back in the chair, and like its fingers were here, and its palm was there. That's how big its hand was. And he leaned in, and he kind of made that noise that an alligator makes for like its mating call, where you can't like hear it, but you could feel the percussion of the rumble in your chest, like a growl, but you could only feel it. And as he got closer, I could eventually hear it. And he said, "Don't make me hit you again." And when he got in really close, I jammed my thumb in its eye, with my thumb, because I thought he was trying to kill me, and I was cornered. And it just kind of like, closed its eye. And I remember a tear came down. I thought, oh, at least I heard it, like at least maybe. So at least I heard it. And it just kind of leaned forward and collapsed my chest and pushed against my heart until I blacked out. When I woke up, I was completely strapped in. I remember he said something like, I'm sorry I have to do this to you. Because I think he was like a working caste reptile, which they're not like the draconians. They're not, they might eat people, but only, it's kind of like a force of nature in the sense that they do it for food, while, the royal caste, like the draconians, they like to see people suffer. Like, they enjoy the pain and the fear more than the actual eating. And he went, there was a control panel on the wall I couldn't see where the doorway was, where the door was, the opening. And he was doing something I couldn't tell. And he walked out and he closed the door and he tightened the wheel. And I was like hyperventilating to try to get myself to pass out. So I was thinking like maybe it won't hurt if I pass out first. And then it became almost like a out of body experience, I guess you would say. It was kind of like cold, like weightlessness, cold, and then peace. It kind of felt like that. And that was me being pushed up in the fifth. Mm-hmm. And when I came to, the straps were undone, but I was still sitting in the chair, and I was very disoriented. It was like I had amnesia, like I could remember, I could, I could think, I still had the ability to think, but it was like my entire history was gone. Like I couldn't remember my past or anything like that. And I remember there was a guy who looked like a Gestapo, and he had slick back blonde hair with like an undercut. He was wearing like a trench coat, and he was kind of gesturing to the reptile, like he felt sorrowful for it, but he wasn't talking. And the reptile was back toward me, and he was doing the same thing, moving their arms around. And he was actually a first-class petty officer on the base. And Robert later on told me all about this, the XO, where the Master Chief of the base was an off-world German. He was the third in command. The S3, who was lieutenant, like a legal officer, he was an off-world German. That guy, the first class, he was an off-world German. There was a senior chief with a mustache and glasses, and he was an off-world German. So it's like the whole Project Paperclip thing is a lot more deeper than we understand. And it's not just people from like, the offspring of people from the 40s that are still into it. It's like people from another world, that are actually infiltrating our government.
Yes.
And yeah, they were all just like, either non-commissioned officers or officers in the U.S. Navy. They wore these uniforms. Mm-hmm. And I slid down the chair, and I said something. The first thing that came in my head was, "Can I go to bed now?" Because I was very exhausted, and I was swaying, and I fell down to my hands and knees. And I remember the boot coming into my vision, and he said, "I should have you executed for what you did to my man. Do you hear me?" And I fell over to my side, and the reptile said, "It doesn't matter. He doesn't remember." And then I remember being carried by it, kind of like a duffel bag. It just had me like under its arm, and my, with my head facing towards the back. And I said something like, "I have to pee." I was like, "I have to pee," because all my weight was on my bladder. And I said, "Put me down for a second. Let me go to the bathroom." And he just wasn't listening. I just passed out. And then I remember seeing a bright light, and Robert said that was the looking glass, where we were passing through the looking glasses, and we're going inside the moon. We were taking a portal into the moon. And he laid me down on a bed, and I remember there was like the medical light, like a round light, and it was just like you have here. It was like LEDs, like the little LEDs everywhere with a big medical light. And I heard ripping and tearing. And then all of a sudden, someone started putting like stickers on my chest. So it was like they're giving me a physical. They're opening packages and putting stickers on my chest and stuff. And I remember the reptile said he has to urinate, and I heard one long tear, and it was a woman, and she put a catheter in me. And I said she was pretty, and it was kind of like this weird ignorance is bliss thing. Like I was just saying the first thing that came to my head. It was like I was like a child. And I asked if I could hold her hand. She said, "Give me a minute," and then she started holding my hand, and then I just passed out. I woke up and I was in this white room by myself, and I was there for probably about an hour. And then she walks back in, and this was actually a woman that worked on the base who was on IT on the base, but I guess she joined the program and became a nurse. Her name was April, and she put her bag down on the table, and she got out a smart glass pad, which are those like plexiglass looking pads. They're based off the smartphone is based off of them. And she like images started coming up. There was an image on the pad, and she was able to like put her hand on it and kind of pull it up, and it became like a holographic image, and it was like a humanoid body, and she was kind of putting her finger in it and turning it around. You could see the circulatory system. She could put her hand in it and open it up, and then you saw the heart. You could see the brain, like a close up on the heart and the brain. And yeah, she was just giving me a physical almost. And I remember she said, "You smoke," and she went like that. And she said, "See, I had a knocked out tooth right here. I had a tooth implant." She says I could fix anything here. And I actually went to the nearest movie in England near that town was Plymouth. And I remember her at a restaurant. We went as like a group of friends to go see a movie, and she said, "Yeah, I got a tooth knocked out when I was a kid." She just brought it up, and this is an implant. But I remember that memory, and I remember like when she said that, it was almost like I recalled that memory of her on the moon telling me about how she had a tooth knocked out and they were able to grow it back. And she was about to leave. It was the end of her shift, and I said, "Don't leave me. Like I don't want to be in this room by myself, for another day." And she said, "It's all right. I'll be back tomorrow." And I remember I stood in front of her and I said, "I don't know what to do or say. All I know is I don't want you to leave me." And I grabbed her hand, and she liked that. So she took me out of this room, and it was almost like a change of shift. It looked like we were in the courtyard of like a condominium. It was about like 5, 6 floors up. There were women waiting with babies, and there were men like walking, and there was like a train on either side of me. Like I was in like a medical building, and on either side there was like a train tunnel. And the men were wearing like light gray jumpers, like light gray jumpsuits. And there were these 4 lifts in the middle of this courtyard area, and they had no railings. They were like elevator lifts. So she grabbed my hand and she took me on this lift, and it went straight up like to the 5th floor to her room, and then it took us directly to her room. It went forward and it took us to her room. And I remember there was a woman with a baby on this sidewalk on the 5th floor, and there was no railings. And I said, "Aren't you afraid you're going to fall off?" And she said, "Oh, no, you can't fall off." And she just stepped off, and there was like this invisible field. And she said that every floor has like this field. I said, "How far does it go?" She said, "All the way to the other side of the wall." And she said, "The kids play on it, but they're not supposed to." Then this woman, April, she took me into her room, and it was very like Spartan, like bare bones. It was like a couch, a coffee table, a desk by the front door. There was like a bar kitchen area, a bathroom and a bedroom. And she took me into her bedroom, and we started to kiss. And she said, "Wait a minute, what's your name?" And I said, "I don't remember." And she said, "Think, come on, everybody remembers their name." And I thought about it, and I said, "Daryl." And then we started to kiss, and then we wound up having sex. And I was leaning against the headboard, and she was laying on my chest. And I kind of just dozed off just for like a second. And I opened my eyes, and I was back in England. And like that's how it happened to me. It was like I remembered like the first couple days. And that first class even said to me, he said, "Some people remember the first day or two, but nobody remembers anything after that." And I stood up, and I was kind of in a panic because I was like, I was with a woman. It wasn't like I slept. It was just like I closed my eyes and I woke and I opened them back up. And it was bizarre because the chair in my room was in front, like facing my bed. My uniform was like laid over top of it. My shoes were tucked underneath. I still had my socks on, which I never do, and I still had like my t-shirt on, my undershirt on. And I kept on saying I was with a woman. I ran my fingers through my hair because I was panicked, and I had like burnt stubble in my hair. And then I ran my fingers down my chest, and I had burnt stubble in my chest hair. And then I took off the shirt and the socks, and I had clay on the tops of my feet. And I looked in the mirror, and I was very toned. Like I was in pretty good shape. I was in the military, but I was very toned. I was like a lot more muscular than I was. I didn't know like what was happening. And I remember I walked out of the room, I got dressed and I walked out of the room, and there was this guy who thought he was like top dog of the base of the barracks of our barracks area, and he was leaning on a wall like waiting for me, and he said, "Congratulations, you made it." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "20 years is a long time. A lot of people don't make it back." He said,
Hmm.
"Congratulations." And I actually missed Saturday because I went on a Friday and I missed Saturday and I woke up on a Sunday. And that was like the first time that ever happened where I just completely lost a day. And yeah, that's kind of how it happened. That's the introduction. I mean, do you have any questions? That's
Absolutely. Okay. Well, first and foremost, I mean, you mentioned that you had intercourse with this lady. I heard, based on your talk over the alien event, that this lady was actually a Pleiadian from the Taygeta star system. Is that correct? Or
no,
that's
no, that was further on in the story.
oh, I see. Okay,
This
so
woman
that
was just from Earth. Yeah, this was just a woman that worked on base, and she joined the
oh,
program
so
as
this was
well.
a human that was
Yeah.
also serving in this off-world program. Okay, interesting.
Mhm.
Now, one of the questions that the Galactic Jedi's had was the reptilians that you encountered, were they positive or malevolent, or they were just kind of neutral? What were they?
Well, this one reptile, I would consider him neutral.
Neutral.
But
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the ones that I would meet, I remember the ones on the ship in Nachtwaffen. There was one master. He was called the master of the ship, and then he had like three others with him, three other reptiles, and they looked almost like Skeksis from Dark Crystal. They had kind of like a long snout, and they had like almost like it looked like a hunchback, but they wore like robes that drug behind them. I'm guessing concealing a tail. And I remember the robes were kind of like, I don't know, they kind of had scale patterns in them, but they also had like, I don't know, runes or something like that in them as well. And it would actually shimmer and kind of shift. It was almost like a holographic kind of robe. But yes.
So we are aware that you served within the fleets. You were a pilot for the for Solar Warden, right? For one of the fleets. Now, you also mentioned that you also worked with the Dark Fleet. How did that happen? Because from what I understand, the Dark Fleet and Solar Warden are like opposites, right?
Yes, but I mean, it's kind of like even when you're at war with somebody, you're still making deals with them. You know what I mean? You're still making backdoor deals. And what happened originally was um, I went to the mines of the moon as punishment. Robert told me I was supposed to do 40 years. He said it's a special punishment they do for people where they don't erase your memory. They just send you back in time and they age regress you. And he said almost everybody commits suicide from that because it's like a special punishment. And yeah, so I was supposed to do that. And I asked him later on, I wanted some sort of timeline, like, where was I at, how long? And he said 3 months, Mines of the Moon, 2 years, Nachtwaffen, and the rest of the time in Solar Warden. But when I was in the mines, Robert was actually there. He seemed to keep an eye on his people. And it's also kind of one of these things, if you're in a world that is conquered by the negative, ETs really don't have like a good and evil kind of concept. There's a positive and negative. You need them both to create the polarity of life. You know what I mean? It's kind of more like that. They consider it. And if you're, a world that's conquered by the negative half, or, on Earth, it's called, the Satanist kind of is what it's called. You kind of have to, even if you're a positive person, if you're working in these programs, if you're a part of these programs, you have to pretty much do as they say, or they'll take it out on your family. They want you to have like he had a daughter, and he said, he had to work with them, or they would hurt his daughter, and that was his excuse of
Mhm.
why he had to do this. And
Correct.
yeah, it was the mines, and I remember he came up and he talked to a German, and then the German came up to me and he held like this device in front of me, and he said, "Come with me," and I went with him, and I got processed in pretty much in the Dark Fleet, which was like, remember there was one of those tall white aliens with the big black eyes and bald and stuff, kind of standing in the corner, and there was I guess a German, and he had the kind of like a regular medical suit on. He had like a hat on with a mask, and he showed me these little drones strapped me to a table, and even strapped my head down. That strapped me down to a table, and he said, "I'm going to put this needle in your head. It's your implant." And then he cracked my skull and put it in my brain. And then I remember the table flipped forward, and I felt like a needle going into my spine, almost like a spinal tap, and it got cold. And I'm guessing that was the tech. Like they put like an artificial intelligence kind of technology in you when you're with the reptiles. And yeah, I was put into a room for like a day to kind of like let it take hold of me, like a dark room for a day, and then they took me out, like washed me off with like a hose, gave me a bag of like a bunch of clothes, like a big duffel bag full of stuff, and I was in the Dark Fleet, and that's like how quick it was. It went from the mines to that.
Oh, now, are all the soldiers that are associated with the Dark Fleet, are they all integrated with technology? Do they
Yes,
all
as
have
far as I know. Well, I
okay.
mean, even the positive ETs have tech in their body, but it's not AI. They control it. It kind of it knows what to do on its own, but when there's like a specific task, like if you're hurt or something like that, if you're injured, you actually have to go to like a smart glass pad and direct it where to focus on. While with
Hmm,
AI, you don't have to do that, but then you run the risk of like, AI takes you over, takes your body, your mind over, your soul over pretty much. But yeah, like I remember all of the Dark Fleet did it. But I believe whenever they, went back to their home world, and were on kind of like a leave, kind of, I guess you would say, like a vacation time, because they just didn't stay on the ship constantly. The tech was removed from their body. So then they're like the people on their world, like the German world, it's not like everybody has tech. It's pretty much like Earth, and it looks like the 40s. It's like men wear suits and fedoras, and women wear
hmm.
dresses and pillbox hats. It's like very old-fashioned looking. Even the architecture is very old-fashioned looking. It's not like what you would think of like extremely high technology.
I see. Now, besides the biometric technology, is there any other technology that you were exposed to that you might want to share?
Oh, I mean, yeah. The ships were like AI. Well, I mean, there were suits in the Dark Fleet. There were suits. The suits could jump pretty high. They would assist you in breathing. So you could breathe on. I was on Mars for a while. You could breathe on Mars. There is some air. There's like desert shrubs and things like that on Mars, but
Yeah,
you
that's what I
can
heard.
walk and yeah, you can walk and sit down. But if you try to run, you'll pass out from lack of oxygen. So you have to have the suit to run. The suits are, good for long range fire, but they're not really that great for close, hand to hand. But they're more meant for like, being fired upon. They
Mhm.
have things like rail guns. If you're only expecting enemy personnel, they'll give you rail guns. But if you're expecting like ships and vehicles, they have like laser and plasma as well. On Mars, I did things like, it was a lot of mantises. Mantises are very good at DNA manipulation. They're like experts with DNA. And we had to track down mantises and try to capture them, take them back to the ship so they could be interrogated. They have like a machine. They can extract thoughts from you or memories from you, and they can learn more about DNA manipulation. And the mantises are very psychic, very telepathic. And they can actually like put like your worst memory or fear kind of back into your mind and kind of like send some people into like the fetal position. They can put a great fear upon you. And they used to run into the caves a lot. There were a lot of caves on Mars, and the spiders lived in these caves, and they were about uh, 3 meters long. I mean, 3 meters in diameter, about 10 feet. And they had almost like pinchers, like a dung beetle. They had like these two things that could grab you, and then they had fangs that they could put into you. And I became almost like a sergeant or a chief kind of. I started breaking in like new officers from the German academy and things like that. And I remember one guy who was very eager. He tried running in after one of them in a cave. And if they ran into a cave, I would just cloak. These suits could cloak you, like were you completely invisible. And I would just cloak. And usually the spiders would run out. I was told by the Germans they had the intelligence of a dog, pretty much. And they would run out and they would like slam their front two like you know legs. They kind of like how spiders have front two like little arms almost. They'd run out and they'd slam those on the ground and they'd wait and they were like bluffing you and to try to get you to run so they could pick up your vibrations because just like a spider they kind of that's how they see. They don't spin webs. That's why they live in the caves so they can pick up the vibrations in the caves. And there's a lot of like sandstorms and things like that. So there were a lot of like large four-legged lizards, like monitor kind of lizards on Mars and things like that, and that's what they would feed on. But yeah, this German ran into the cave, and three spiders came out. He got the first two, and the third one got him, and it grabbed a hold of him, and it dug its fangs into him, and it snapped him in half. broke
Oof.
them in half with these prongs. And it kind of shocked me. So I took a step back and it knew exactly where I was. It just took one step to know exactly where I was, and it was coming at me. And I was firing upon it with my rail gun, and it screamed kind of like a wounded rabbit, like the way a wounded rabbit screams when it's, a hurt rabbit. And I just kept on firing, and I remember I knocked one of its legs off, and it kept going, and then eventually it stopped. I just shot it like, I don't know, 10 times probably. And yeah, I mean, that was my experience. Some of my experiences on Mars.
Interesting. Let's take some questions from the audience. If you guys have any questions for Daryl, this is your time to ask him any questions you guys might have for Daryl. So let's show this one right here. This is a question from Ricky Lee 1111. Can you read that, Daryl?
I have
He's
the
asking.
black goo. Yeah. I don't remember like a black goo. I think that AI tech that they gave you into like a spinal tap thing, I think if there was a black goo, that was probably it, because I've heard that that's an artificial intelligence type of thing.
Yeah.
The black goo itself. Yeah, yeah, they have plasma weapons.
Yeah, everything we see in these sci-fi movies is all being disclosed, guys. It's all part of the off-world programs and more. That's just the surface of what they have. Holographic computers, monitors, laser weapons, nanotechnology in the form of suits like Iron Man, right? Marvel discloses a lot of information. Is that very similar to the suits that you guys used? That nanotechnology that was impenetrable?
I mean, maybe like the first Iron Man suit, maybe it was something similar to that. But I remember they were black and gray, maybe the suits. Right. They weren't like very flashy or anything like that. But yeah, as far as like a nanotech, as far as it going into your body and then it could create a suit, I don't remember anything like that. But Robert told me what you were saying before about how they show you these things. He called that soft disclosure, is what he called it, and he said it's like a way to like tell the people, but it's also kind of like a way. It's like we're letting them know, but they don't care. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a satanic thing where even with like the Georgia Guidestones and things like that, where they want to lower the population to 500,000 and everything else. It's like they're kind of saying like we're letting them know what we want to do to them, so it's their fault because they're not fighting back.
So I believe this is coming from Sarah Drew. She's asking, how does the CIA work within this system? Do they function like Earth's prison guards?
I mean, the CIA, as far as I know, the CIA does things like they just basically try to undermine society, pretty much. They want to. Their task is to destroy civilizations and rebuild them in their own image, kind of thing. But I mean, as far as like the CIA goes, I would say they don't know very much. They don't, they're not very important. I mean, unless you have access to med beds and age regression technology, those are the main people that they consider a lot of importance. CIA and government officials, most of them, they really don't have any knowledge of this. And he also told me that things that the CIA do. He told me that they start at the lowest level possible, and he told me that they would start doing things to comic books, like they would kill Spider-Man and they would replace him with a half Hispanic, a black kid named Miles Morales and things like that. And then the Satanists or the CIA or what do you want to call them, they kind of stand back and they see if the public will react. And if they don't do anything, then they go to the next step. And he told me that they'll start making remakes of movies and they'll be awful. He said that, Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford will come back when he's 60 and it's going to be, horrible. They'll make Ghostbusters remakes. They'll make all these different remakes of when you were a kid, and they're horrible on purpose. And then they'll kind of stand back and they'll see the reaction of the people. And if the people don't do anything, they'll go to your statues and they'll start tearing your statues down. And I asked them why they did that, and he said they wish to destroy your heroes because you're less likely to fight back if you don't have any heroes to look up to, like our history and things like that. And that's why these things happen. And they always start at the lowest level possible.
Right. Makes a lot of sense because they have redone all of those movies. Just the last movie that they did about Spider-Man and the multiverse. I mean, they had a every nationality playing Spider-Man in that one. This is a question. What are the biggest spacecraft in Space Force?
Space Force, that was something near the end of my service that actually came to be. I remember that. But as far as Solar Warden, U.S. Navy, the largest was 4 kilometers. The starships were 4 kilometers long. So I'm guessing maybe Space Force. I've heard, I don't know this personally, but I heard Space Force is more, I don't know, like more to protect the Earth itself. They kind of stay around the Earth, while Solar Warden goes more further out in space.
Exactly. That's normally how it works. Yeah, I think Solar Warden has over how many colonies? Over 100 colonies throughout the Milky Way, would you say?
I mean, I'm not sure offhand right now. I knew that we were kind of like, there was a time where we were almost like, and this is when I was with the Pleiadians and things like that. It was like a joint task force between them, Arcturians, the Pleiadians. We were all kind of working together on the same page. And Earth was, or our solar system in general, was pretty much on lockdown. And it got to a point where nobody was allowed to leave Earth, or come to Earth. It was just on complete lockdown. And he told me that you would start seeing things like meteorites with like gold sparks or silver sparks behind it, and they would claim it was space debris from a space station, but he said it's actually their ships being shot down because they're trying to get away.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that is correct. Another question is, tell us about your, let's not use the word SCX, but tell us about your encounter with the Pleiadian from Taygetin. I believe this, all right? I've heard it from others, testimonies about Earthlings having intercourse with off-world, extraterrestrial sentient life forms. You've actually experienced that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that she was a Nordic from the Pleiadians, from the star system of Taygeta?
Yeah, star system of Taygeta. Yeah, and it was like I was laying down, she was on top, she locked eyes with me, we switched bodies for a moment, and then when I came back to my body, and then she lifted her head up for about 5 seconds, and then looked down at me again, locked eyes, and it became almost kind of like this omnipresence oneness with the universe. It was like one with the universe thing, and I really didn't know how long it was. I couldn't tell if I was there for hours or days, and then it was just like, I opened my eyes and it was over, and it wasn't like it wasn't as we see it. It wasn't as STX. It wasn't like as we see it. It was more like a spiritual kind of experience. It was less of a physical thing and more of a spiritual thing for them.
I see. Now, do you think this has anything to do with genetic programs creating hybrids?
Well, for me, like Robert told me, and I remember Kino told me, and things like that. Different people told me, and I remember hearing it while I was in the program. I'm something called a telepathic empath, which means I don't need to know the language of the beings. They could be a higher density being than me. I can pretty much communicate with everyone because I remember one of the things Robert told me. I said, well, why did the Pleiadians, Taygetans, why do they like me so much? And he said, you could talk to the children. And I said, what do you mean? And he said that the children speak a type of pig Latin that they know how to speak till about 5 or 6 years old, where it's almost like telepathy is like 50% emotion and 50% words. But with the children, it's about 80% emotion and 20% words. And he said that they speak almost like a baby talk with words here and there. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it's just baby talk. And I asked him to do it for me. And he kind of did it like, we went to the apagata and then over to the artikaka. And it's almost like those babble words are almost like pure emotion. And he told me, and I remember doing it as later on, as time went on, that I could actually, understand it. And they were all very amazed because none of the adults could understand what the children were saying when they spoke this kind of pig Latin.
So someone wants to know, Mark McDonald wants to know, this is all still going on. And this kind of ties into the question Chastine Rose is asking, is this part of the negative timeline, or will we have to deal with this in the positive timeline as well? Seems like there's so much evil going on from behind the scenes. So tell us, what is your take on the positive and the negative timelines, and when are they going to split in your perspective?
Well, Robert told me about the negative and the positive timelines. Before you get out of the Navy, and this is how I remember everything, because he told me everything. He was speaking to me telepathically. I didn't know I could do that. as time went on, I remember I had memories of being able to do that with my father when I was very young as a child, and my father knew how to do it. But he told me that he came from the year 2580, where everybody looks like Mike Pence. And he said that, but Mike Pence is no good. He was trying to stop his mission. He was trying to keep the original negative timeline. He explained to me that they all had black hair, the brown eyes, sometimes blue eyes or green eyes. They all kind of have that needle nose, like he had that turned up nose like Mike Pence, and he had that constant scowl on his face the way Mike Pence does. His brow's very low. And he said their hair begins to salt and pepper at 50, turns pure white by 60, their eyebrows turn pure white by 70, and their average life expectancy is 110. He said after Hillary Clinton won the election, on her second term, we got into a war with China that was intended to be lost. And he said that the United States just wasn't hit by key targets, like military targets. He said the United States was carpet bombed with nuclear weapons. America fell. It was very, it was horrible the way he explained it. And they had forced breeding programs where they interbred like all the people of Earth. They realized they made a mistake, so they tried to extract a specific gene out, because he said they couldn't get past fifth density. And if a world can't keep evolving, then it dies. So he said we got the fifth, but we couldn't get past fifth density, and we were doomed. And then whenever they tried to extract this gene, it created like this Mike Pence people, where everybody kind of looked the same and they all had black hair and things like that. He said that we were in the positive timeline because the military got Trump in. But he said, 45 in. The military got 45 in. But he said that, but he's not, he kind of said, but it's not him, it's the military. Like, he's just a figurehead. And they approached them to do it and things like that. And he said it's just going to be much better. He said eventually there will be, med technology will be released to the public. He said that he was telling me things like the Library of Alexandria wasn't actually, the materials inside weren't burned by Caesar. He took everything out first, like all the scrolls and tablets and everything else. It's all in the catacombs of the Vatican. He said history's a lie, evolution's a lie. Where he brought up the Atlanteans, where the ancestors of the Atlanteans and all this thing. He said that all the world's gold is in the catacombs of the Vatican, and it's going to be distributed somewhat. He said because it was like a septillion in U.S. dollars. He said it's just mounds and mounds of gold, enough to make everybody on Earth like 100 millionaire. But he said nobody would work, so they're not going to make everybody 100 millionaire. But he said all your taxes are going to come back to you. You're going to get money just for being born on Earth because it's so plentiful with natural resources. You won't have to. We're not going to be ruled by money anymore. Is basically what he said. Money's going to work for us, and we are going to have like a financial system. But everybody's going to be able to take nice vacations. It doesn't matter if you work construction or if you're a doctor. Everybody's going to have plenty of money. You won't have to worry about food. You won't have to worry about anything like that. This kind of suffering, all these world wars, these pointless wars will be over. And he was just telling me I kind of like to concentrate on the things he told me, if that's okay with you, as far as that, unless you have more questions.
Yes, Cosmic Kiev 2.0 is asking, can you describe what the looking glass technology looks like?
I don't have a lot of recall of it, but he said that I used looking glass. I think it was something like, it almost seemed to be like an electrical field would kind of happen, and then that field would open up and create a portal. Like you would see kind of like, electricity come together, almost like a Tesla coil, but much, much larger. And then that field would kind of open up, and then that would become the looking glass. And he told me many things about the looking glass technology, and you could see pretty much anywhere on Earth. He said it had a 94% accuracy in the future. If you were here right now, it had a 100% accuracy going back in the past, unless somebody actually changed the timeline. But into the future, from where you are in time, it had a 94% accuracy, a 4% alternate, outcome, and then a 2% variable, something they weren't expecting at all. So it's very accurate.
And also, CALU wants to know is, do you know that this is the positive timeline and the shift in consciousness is coming?
This is the positive because Trump won. If this was the negative, Hillary Clinton would have won, and then
See,
that would
told
have
you
been
guys. But maybe we
yeah.
shouldn't say those terms right now. But you know what I mean. Let's call her the witch. We'll just call her the witch.
Yeah. Sorry, and she is too. He told me that too. He said that
I
the
heard
reason
it.
the reason she goes to Haiti every year, at least once a year, the Clintons are always visiting Haley, and it has nothing to do with like humanitarian Red Cross or anything like that. It has to do with she is a voodoo witch, and her master is in Haiti. Like the person she learns from is in Haiti.
That sounds just about right. So, out of all the Navy SEALs, what's the percentage that are recruited into these off-world, secret programs,
I mean, as far as Navy SEAls,
or
as you said,
Marines or military?
Well, he told me that you had to have at least 110 IQ to even be able to handle the density shift, unless you're actually being put as punishment, like in the mines. That's the only way you would be in. So it's less about your physical and things like that, and it's more about IQ. He told me IQ had a lot to do with how telepathic you are, how able you are to look down timelines, in other words, be able to see into the future. So that's actually what they're looking for more than anything else. And more than, they can mold you the way they want. They can put tech in you and mold you the way they want. But they're looking for that high IQ. That's the main thing they're looking for. And you have to have at least 110 just to even get into the minds of the moon.
Mm-hmm. Now, James Rinks believes that a lot of the volunteers that are down here in human form, hence the star seeds, that every single one of them, or at least 90% of them, have been involved in these programs and have been mind wiped. Is that true or not? Because remember, there's been a huge influx of higher evolved souls that have been coming in since the 50s, according to Dolores Cannon.
I mean, I don't know about the exact numbers, but there's a lot more people than you would think. A lot more. When I woke up in that density chamber, I forgot to say there were actually 3 guys laying like on a mattress on the floor next to me when I came to, and they had clothes on like they were kidnapped from a club.
Mm-hmm.
They had like shirts, nice shirts on and things like that. Like somebody drugged them and kidnapped them into the program. So I think a lot of kidnapping happens, things like that.
I see. And they also want to know if you have all of this information in a book. Have you written a book?
I'm in the process. I'm probably about 40% done. And,
Okay.
I have a website, DarylDJames.com, DARYL, D is in Delta, James.com. And it has all my videos. And yeah, I'm in the process of working on a book.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put all your links in the description if people want to, learn more about your story, because your story is fascinating. I mean, it sounds very accurate. We are in the positive timeline, absolutely. If we weren't, the witch would have won in 2001-6, and things would have been different, like you said. America wouldn't be here by now. So, absolutely. Let's see. All
And
right, guys. Go ahead.
If people are wondering why things are difficult and difficult right now, Robert even told me that he said there's something called DNA memory, and he said it has to be difficult. Like we have to struggle through this because he said the military could step in right now if they wanted, and they could fix everything, but it would just happen again in 100 years because people would forget. He said that it has to be such a traumatic event, whether it's through the losing family members through the vaccine, the whole the thing, but putting the mask on and everything like that. But it has to be that way because we actually have a DNA memory that will go from our children to our children's children, where it'll be in their subconscious to where they will never let this happen again. So we actually have to let that happen. We have to make this difficult. This has to be difficult, and it's taking longer than I would like it to happen, but it has to be like a struggle for us to be reborn, kind of.
Now, according to a lot of whistleblowers, and according to my intel as well, we are expecting some sort of a event, right? That is going to split the timelines, right? Where the people, the righteous people, are going to be going into a better world, right? What they call the golden age, fifth dimensional Earth. A lot of people call this event the Great Solar Flash. What do you think about the Great Solar Flash?
Yeah, I mean, I remember even seeing something like that with the Pleiadians. They showed me the last time it happened, and it was almost like a religious event to them, like the last world it happened to, and they were all standing, and it was like the star was just burning normal, and then it kind of went out for a few seconds, and then it kind of spit and sputter back to life, and it reignited. And it was kind of like it went from like a white light to like a
Mm.
slightly kind of green kind of light. The star itself turned into almost like a slightly green, and that was like a going from fifth density. So I think that solar flash has something to do with it because it has to do with your star, your world. They all have to be kind of on the same page. It's like your star itself has to ascend to a higher density as well. It's just not the people itself. It's like the whole world ascends at once.
Yes, I totally agree with that. In fact, I talk about that in my course or my online course. I talk about the ascension of an entire galaxy being triggered by the ascension of our solar system. So you're absolutely right. Now, this person, Kimberly Gauss, is asking, what about implants done to military children?
Well, if you're asking about people who's were like children whose parents were in the military, I guess is what it is. I don't know about implants, but I do remember um, that first class petty officer when he saw my high IQ score. He said, "Were you homeschooled?" And I said no. And he said, "Well, I guess you just slipped through the cracks." Like almost he was surprised that I hadn't been put in the programs earlier, like in an earlier point of life. So I think a lot of this, standardized testing and things like that is to find out if kids do have high scores so they can be put into these programs because they take them when they're children as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that there are positive implants that have been put by positive extraterrestrials in certain individuals, and that there are negative implants. Do you have any info on that?
Yes, of course. I mean, but the positive implants, like I said, they don't have the AI. Like positive ETs, they do not let the AI into their bodies because they know it's AI itself is a collective consciousness of some sort of being like in another universe. Like there's like this collect I wouldn't even call it a being. It's just a collective artificial intelligence consciousness, and it all kind of it's like the Borg. It all kind of runs off one hive mind consciousness. So yeah, like a positive ET wouldn't allow that into their body. But
Right.
yeah, but they do have implants. They do have tech in their body that it makes them stronger, faster, helps them heal quicker. Basically, makes them to their peak and beyond.
All right. Did you hear that, Galactic Jedi's? There are such things as positive implants that are non-AI that are here to protect you, heal you, and make you stronger. Coming from the horse's mouth itself, Daryl. Oh boy. Let's take just a couple more questions, and then because I know it's getting late over in your neck of the woods. You're out on the East Coast, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Any question that you might want to ask or address that you see on the chat?
Oh, I don't have the chat in front of
Oh,
me.
you don't have the chat. Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, yeah, nice. Anunnaki reptilians in the military. I'm not sure about Anunnaki. I really don't follow a lot of like ET lore and alien lore. I try to when I go to events or when I do things like this is the most I really hear of it. I don't like to muddy up my thoughts, my memories with other people's accounts on it. So
Mhm.
will the
All right.
chemtrail stop? Go ahead.
Med beds. When do you think med beds? I keep hearing that um, she goes by the name of Sky Prince, who's working on getting this technology out to the public. Have you heard of Sky Prince?
No, no.
No. Okay. So, when do you think we'll be having the med beds rolled out?
I mean I think if Trump doesn't or 45 doesn't come in earlier, I think when he's reelected, which I'm I'm 99% sure he will be because people are very upset. Um, I think that's going to be a big turning point right there. And I think Robert actually said they weren't. He was looking down my timeline
Hmm.
and he knew, and just by seeing my own future, because he was genetically augmented to be able to look down timelines, he saw that Biden won the presidency and he wasn't supposed to. That was like part of the 4%, alternate outcome that could have happened. So that happened, and they thought, 45 was going to make it 2 in a row, and they weren't expecting this. So this was something they weren't expecting. So we're probably about 4 or 5 years behind schedule, I would say.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So what do you know about this negative ancient AI that is pretty much at the core of all evil in the multiverse? Would you agree? You've heard anything about that?
What I know about that is it's in another universe, and we don't have that ability. I don't think we really know any ET that has the ability to go into different universes in this universe. But Robert told me about Kruger, and I've heard people say that Kruger's negative, but he said Kruger is helping us, and Kruger has this technology to be able to go into alternate universe or other universes. I believe he said there's 8 that they know of, and they're all trying to get all the Earths on the same page. So they're all assisting and saving all these different Earths. So we're all on the same page, so we can all band together, like all the positive ETs from all these different universes, to attack the AI. Because the AI is in a different universe. The main mind, the main brain of the AI is in a different universe, and that's why it's so hard to combat. But Kruger has this technology to be able to go into other universes. So they're trying to get us all on the same page so we can eventually wage a war against this AI and destroy it.
And we shall prevail. We shall prevail. Now, I guess that's it. I don't see any more questions. I mean, there is, but I know I also want to be respectful of your time. And so, Daryl, it was a pleasure having you on my channel. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And I'm sure that the Galactic Jedis are going to want to have you back again.
Thank you, Ishmael. And lots of my videos are on my webpage. Yeah.
Give us your website.
Daryl, Daryl, D is in Delta, James.com. So DarylDJames.com.
And I'm also going to put his website's link in the description for those that want to follow up and learn more about Daryl. Daryl, thank you for your service, not only for our solar system, but for our country. And you have a beautiful evening.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. All right, guys, may the God force be with you all. As you guys know, we are on a positive timeline, and we will win this war against this ancient alien AI that is coming from the Phantom Matrix alternative universe. We will see you guys in the next one.